Welcome to Consider Yourself Hugged. We are Tammy, Gracie, and Michelle. And a hug is a gesture intended to convey a sense of care, support, safety, intimacy, and affection. And even though we can't wrap our arms around you, we want you to consider yourself hugged. Now, this is Tammy, letting you know that Michelle, Gracie, and I recorded an intro with all of us talking, but guess who forgot to hit record? So next time, we'll have a different intro. Thanks for your grace. We are so excited to be here because this is our first real episode of us now co-hosting Consider Yourself Hugged. So it's the three of us now. You met all of us together a few weeks ago, right? We did, or a few months. I don't know. How long has it been? It's been a while. It's been a while. So we are now together with you. We will be doing things differently from time to time. We're going to have exciting new ideas. But the biggest thing that we always still want to do is be here for you, help you with your mental and emotional well-being, and leave here feeling like we have given you a big hug. So I don't know what we're doing today. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and I know Michelle has some things she wants to talk about. So do y'all have anything you want to just talk about before we jump in? I'll take that as a no.
Crickets.
Do y'all not know how much I hate awkward pauses? Like, not awkward. What is it called? Not pause.
Silence. Yeah.
Silence. I can't stand awkward silence.
You are going to edit part of this out, right?
I don't know. It depends on what you say. What are you intending to say? Well, it is Mental Health Awareness Month. At least I think it will still be Mental Health Awareness Month when we get this posted. So yeah, we want to help you with that. So Michelle, you had some things you wanted to talk about today. So
yes.
Over to you.
And yeah, so super excited to be talking about Mental Health Awareness Month. This month it's May. May 11th is Children's Mental Health Awareness Day. And
I didn't know that.
Yes. So lots of stuff kind of going on at work around that. But I wanted to just start out and read some statistics for Mental Health America in regards to mental health in America. That was kind of like redundant, but
no, that's okay. And we have these statistics. What an awful word in the show notes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they will definitely be in the show note, along with a link to the website, because that website has lots of good information. And so this month, we want to talk about lots of different aspects of mental health. So we're going to be talking about some mental health diagnosis, what it means to live with a diagnosis, and some different topics that definitely, are really impactful for women and that have an impact on mental health. Okay. And so just to kind of start out, I'm going to read these, and then I'm going to ask just kind of each of you to comment on, like, if anything surprised you or if you were already aware, which you probably are. But so 50
yeah, she was being super like a couple days ago, like, I'm just going to ask you questions. Do you want me to tell you now? And we were like, no. Just throw it at us. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But are these just for women?
The statistics, there was a very good point. The statistics are for the U.S. in general. I'm sorry,
it's a terrible word. I'm sorry.
Laugh, Tammy.
Sorry. Go ahead. For the statistics.
So the statistics are actually for. This is going down here a lot fast. It's actually for everyone in America. It's primarily adults, and we'll be talking more about children a little bit later, but it is for both men and women. The statistics cover both. Gotcha. But in America, 50 million Americans live with a diagnosed mental illness. 50 million. And so it seems like with that many, like, that we have a Mental Health Awareness Month to try to make people more aware. It seems like people are aware, but they kind of live in isolation with things. So I'm such a big fan of this month to help people feel not so alone. And
Yes.
so 19 million individuals live with a substance use disorder this past year. So that's just looking at this past year, 19 million individuals. 20 million adults are living with major depressive disorder, 3.3 million with bipolar disorder this past year, 42.5 million with an anxiety disorder, 12 million people with PTSD, and 1.5 million with schizophrenia. And so that's not even including things like eating disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, and some of the other things. So when you think about it, that is a huge, huge amount of people that are living with mental health diagnosis. And so, what percentage would you say of individuals? I'm just going to kind of throw this out there first and then get you
Okay.
guys' opinion.
All right,
The
Gracie.
percentage of those people that do not receive any treatment. What percentage of people do you think don't receive treatment?
Do not receive treatment?
Do not,
Do not.
according to Mental Health America.
I haven't seen the stats recently, but I do know that, now this is old, like 10 years ago, it was over 60% of people did not receive treatment.
I was going to say about half. So
I'm hoping it's gotten better than that.
Just slightly, 56%.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of people. So like, did these numbers, did they surprise you? Or are they kind of on point with what you would have thought?
yeah, I've been teaching a lot of mental health webinars for quite some time, and especially this month. And so there are some numbers. I'm just going to say numbers instead of statistics that we cite, and it seems to be different, but depending on the research. But I don't think tell me what the 50 million was again.
Individuals in America living with a mental illness.
I don't think I knew that one. That's a lot of stinking people. We're talking about with a diagnosis.
Yes. Yeah, it's a lot of people. It's a lot of people kind of, like I said, that seem to live in isolation. Of course, not everyone, but I do think that's something that people seem to keep to themselves.
Well, it is. And I think part of the problem is how we even define the term mental illness, right? The way we use it implies you're either healthy or ill. And it's not, it's continuous. So when we talk about 50 million people have a mental illness, well, I qualify for that, right? I have diagnoses, things like that. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm struggling. And I think that's the important thing is this is part of the human condition. Life can be hard. But it's not either or. And again, I think the connotation when we say mental illness is somebody who's not functioning, or it's extreme, or it's noticeable, or all that other stuff. And that's simply not the case. And I think
what do you think would be a better way to? What would be a better way, do you think, Gracie, to cite those numbers? Or what would be a better way to collect that data to change?
Well, I don't think collecting the data is the issue. I think like I said, I think it's how we internalize the term.
Well, right. But I mean, that's how.
So maybe even saying things like diagnosable mental health issue or mental health concern.
So one of the next things I was going to talk about very much applies to what you guys are discussing now, the term diagnosis. And so I just kind of sent out a quick, it's not really a survey, but some quick messages out to some individuals I knew and asked them to give me the first word that comes to mind when they hear the word diagnosis. And so I'm going to read you guys some of the things that there's some of the responses I got back and see kind of how it ties into what you guys are talking about.
Do you want to hear ours?
Yes. Do you want to give yours first? Give yours first.
Like if you're saying the first word that comes to mind with diagnosis would be
the first thing you think in your mind.
The first thing I thought of was doctor.
Doctor. Okay. Gracie?
If you'd asked me 20 years ago, I'd be like, okay, diagnosis means there's something wrong, something that needs to be fixed, something that needs to be cured. Now, though, because what I've been doing over the last few years, to me, diagnosis means description.
Description. Okay. I like that description. So the answers I got back several that said fear. Like that the first thing that came to mind when they heard the word diagnosis was fear. And again, I asked this question and did not, they didn't provide explanation or anything like that. It was just one word.
The word.
Yes. Then another person said relief. Another person
That's
said,
so different.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But can I throw something in there? And
Absolutely.
I think the reason is I have had this so many times with clients where people would come to me and they would talk about what's going on. I'm like, oh, well, that is, and I would say a term or a diagnosis. And they're like, oh, you mean this is a real thing? Oh, you mean I'm not the only one? And it was such a relief because so many people had this. It's actually written down in a book. So I like the fact that people are responding with that. That's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then someone else said guide.
Guide.
I think probably, and I think they probably meant in the sense that it helps them guide kind of what to know, where to go next.
Okay. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Somebody else said worry. And someone else, and they did more than just a word, said an epic adventure.
Oh.
And so I'm guessing that was from a personal experience.
Something.
Yes.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah, right. We don't completely know. But and so those were some of the responses that I got back. I also got anxiety. Those were kind of the most common ones. And I think that, the fact that the most common one that I got back was fear.
Yeah.
I mean, like multiple people said fear. And I think like when you think about the word diagnosis, kind of like what Gracie was saying, I think that a lot of people think it means, oh no, there's something really wrong. And yeah, go ahead, Tammy.
Well, I'm not sure if this fits in here, or when you said you were going to do this topic, I met with a woman a couple weeks ago, had a meeting, and she shared with me that she was recently diagnosed with ADHD. Actually, back up, she had shared that with me a long time ago, and then we met and we were talking about that. And I was telling her that, I mean, my mental health, my diagnoses were major anxiety, panic disorder, PTSD, and depression. I don't suffer with depression. In fact, I was really surprised that was even a diagnosis, but the anxiety still, like Gracie said, it comes and goes. It doesn't mean that I'm in it in the moment. But the interesting thing that I realized I was doing is I was searching for another diagnosis. Like I was searching for, because I have these behaviors that lately are really bothering me, and I want there to be a reason for it. And so even if I don't do anything, I'm like, okay, it's like what you said. I don't want to feel like, oh, is this a thing? Like, is it a thing that I take a walk and I have my keys in my left-hand pocket and the whole walk is ruined because the whole time I'm thinking I need to have the keys in the right-hand pocket because I'm going to get in the mailbox with the right hand? And I'm like, is that OCD? Is that ADD? And so I'm thinking of it in terms of, if it's a thing, then it's real. If it's not a thing, then I'm just ridiculous. So I just felt, and I found myself doing that, thinking when you said living with the diagnosis, and I think there is that polar, like either fearful of, what does this mean? Am I going to have to, are people going to see me differently? Am I going to have to go on medication? Am I broken? And there's other people that are like, please tell me what's wrong with me.
It's like validation.
Yeah.
It can be very, very validating. That's not a word I got back, but I can definitely see, and I've definitely experienced that, where people feel like it's a validation. Oh, I'm not XYZ. I'm not crazy. I'm not making all this up in my head. I actually have this diagnosis now. So it can provide a little bit of peace in that way. I can
especially if there's the roadmap saying, okay, not only is this a thing, here's what we can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what she said too. She said she had lived with this. She said two things that were very important. She's a little younger than me, but early 50s. So, well past childhood age. And so it was, an adult diagnosis. and she's lived with these things her whole life. And so there are things that she's doing now. And she was just like, so the one thing she said is, oh my gosh, she, now that she's taking some medication, she's doing some things. She's like, I can function. And the second thing she said is she doesn't talk about it to people not because she's embarrassed, but because when she shares that, a very common response she gets is, oh God, me too. I know what you mean.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so that diagnosis thing is a really interesting topic that some people just want to bond with you over that and say that oh, me too. Oh, I'm OCD too. Oh, and it's like a serious thing that's very painful for people.
Well, but it could be two ways. It could be we're creating that safe space where people feel safe to share. I have this diagnosis too, but there's also the minimization and diminishment. Oh, I'm OCD too. Actually, no, you just like a tidy desk. That's different than OCD. And sometimes people, they don't get that. And so it could be hard going, oh, well, they say they're OCD or ADD or bipolar or whatever, but look at what they're doing with their lives. How come I can't do that? And I think we need to recognize a diagnosis is a legitimate thing. And the common usage of those terms, that's not what that diagnosis means.
Yeah, because I have seen it be stigmatizing in that, like if in the situation like with what you shared, Tammy, with the ADHD, like if someone says, I have ADHD, I'm now on medicine, it changed my life, and someone else says, oh, well, I have that too, but I don't need medicine. Like that's very stigmatizing, even if the person absolutely doesn't mean that to be, it still, can, create some negative feelings for that person that shared.
You kind of brought up that same thing when we got together. I remember now, I couldn't remember what we recorded together, but it was mental health in the church. And Michelle, I remember you talking about or maybe Gracie, one of you said that a testimony is different from advice. So saying this is how my life is working does not mean that that's how your life needs to be working. Two people with a diagnosis will have different.
I mean, especially like with what Gracie just shared as well, like the fact that there are so many things that these terms are used to describe. And so like kind of wrapping your head around the fact that everything does not look the same. Most things are a spectrum. I mean, for me, the perspective of a diagnosis is someone, I mean, that's part of what I do, right? I've given people a diagnosis, shared that with them, kind of been there with them during that. But at the same time, I try to make them understand that nothing is really as uniform as the DSM. Like that is not like, it's a guide that we use to help guide us with treatment. Like, you and I we're both science teachers, and we talked all the time about how, things are easier when you categorize them, the periodic table, all of that. And so it's the same thing. Like once you have the diagnosis, it kind of acts as a guide, but it does not determine as many things as people think that it determines.
Well, and you even use the word spectrum, right? Kind of like I was saying, it's not mentally healthy or mentally ill. It's on a spectrum. And we're just using these words to convey a concept. It's not about who this person is or whatever. And so, so to redefine our understanding of health, of diagnoses, of all this on that continuum, on that spectrum, I think is essential.
And we're all on that continuum. We may not all get to the level of a diagnosis or a mental hospital stay or any of that, but we are all on that. And one thing I love too, Michelle, that you do, and I know you do it too, Gracie, but you did it earlier, and it's second nature to you, is to use that person first language, and not saying that, I don't remember what your figures were, but however many million people are schizophrenic or are bipolar that you're saying living with. And it's an important thing, to take that diagnosis and make it specific to what's going on, health related, but not the person. Yeah. And I think that's an important.
It's not who they are. Yeah, for sure.
No, it's not who they are. Hmm.
Do you think that like the stigma around mental health, around mental health diagnosis, is it getting better, worse, the same? What do you think based on what you guys see in your jobs?
Oh, so much better from what oh my goodness. I mean, 20 years ago, to have a CEO of a large corporation get on a company wide event and say, this is what I do to support my mental health because I had postpartum depression and I know if I don't take care of that would not have happened 20 years ago. And now
Awesome.
I'm seeing stuff like that frequently where people are sharing. And the other thing is 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, it was very performative. If you need anything, just let me know, right? Coming from management and stuff like that. And now I'm starting to see it and it's legit. It's a legit, if you need something, let me know. And I don't see that going away anytime soon. And so that has enabled, allowed, support, encouraged people to say, hi, today I need help without penalty, without punishment, without them being seen as less than or not competent or, all that other stuff. And again, I don't think that's going
And so
away.
you provide services to a lot of different industries, is that correct?
Oh, yes.
Like across the board. And so do you feel like that is across the board, or just do you feel like there are still some areas where there's a struggle?
I think that some of the more traditional, like we have a number of large legal firms, and they're still kind of, but we have
Yeah.
airlines and sports teams and pharmaceutical companies and retail and food industry. And oh my gosh, the changes in the food industry, the support for mental health around that's amazing. So yeah, so it's really, there are some that are, I think, lagging a little bit, but yeah, it pretty much is across industry.
What do you
What do you
see?
think, Tammy?
I mean, I agree. In 1995, I wasn't going to talk to anybody about, you know, okay, I've been in the hospital and now I have been diagnosed with all these things. So, I definitely think better. I think there are I mean, we even talked about, churches, I think have a ways to go. And, I had somebody ask me on a webinar, I don't remember when, but they were talking about, hey, and these are individual people. So this is just really anecdotal. It's not like, you know, research or anything, but the question was, um, I have someone in my life who was struggling, and I just had to basically say, get out of your own self. It's not all about you, and just come on and push forward and go. You don't have to live in this, this anxiety. And they were like, is that okay? And I was like, oh, well,
Well,
just, calm and answer that question. So I think that there are pockets overall. Oh my gosh, especially through the pandemic when the mental health conversation has gone forward, but there's still some places that have ways to go. What are you seeing, Michelle? I mean, you're seeing people every day.
So I definitely agree that it's improving. I think that just from what I see, and I'm not going to name the industries, but I think that there are still some industries that are a little more guarded than others. That there's still some fear about acknowledging different mental health struggles. I think it's so much better than it was, but I think that you that there's still some work to be done.
Well, you think about some some industries like pilots, and you think there could be some fear there. Like if I tell somebody I'm diagnosed with anxiety or depression, or I'm living with bipolar, will they, legally they can't, just fire you for that reason, but what will they trust me?
actually, in some industries, such as that, professionals can have their license revoked if they disclose that they have
Oh, if they disclose just that diagnosis?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So you're right. There are still some pockets where it's a legitimate thing. You can't disclose at work. And that's a problem.
And the fact that, you know, in one area of I have a couple different jobs, but in one of them, I work with adolescents, some of who would like to enroll in the military. And there's some pretty strict rules around that in regards to diagnosis, medication, and so forth. And so I think that understandably there are some things to consider over others, but at the same time, I think that some of those things need to be updated.
Yeah.
I think there's just some.
Yeah.
Right, because a person is still going to be impacted whether or not they have a formal diagnosis. And if somebody is struggling, I'd rather them be getting support than not.
Right. Right. Oh gosh, I had a really good point. What was it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I talked over you.
No, you didn't do it. If it flies through the air and lands in either one of your brains, just let me know. I don't remember. It was something related to those things, but that could be a scary thing. Oh, I know what it was. Just about, we know that there's still this belief that people with certain mental health disorders have a tendency to be violent, or that violence is just attributed. And if you have a mental health, you think about mass shootings and things. So I think that is still there. That if you hear, oh, that person had a mental health diagnosis, and sometimes people don't even process that. It's like, oh, they had a mental health diagnosis.
Right.
Well, you have no idea like how many times I hear, well, I mean, I'm sure you do because you guys also work in areas of mental health. Like when there is a mass shooting, like people that come up to you and say, this isn't a gun issue, it's a mental health issue, right? Like do people say that to you guys? Do you hear that when mass shootings happen? I hear it a lot.
Mm-hmm. What do you say?
It depends on who it is.
Oh, okay.
Right.
What do you say professionally?
Well, really, I mean, it's the same no matter what. Maybe just in a less or more colorful way. But I say that people who are struggling are really across the board. That the majority of individuals, obviously, 50 million individuals in the United States have a mental health diagnosis, and there aren't that many mass shootings in the United States. So obviously, that is not like the core of the problem. If I think something we haven't gotten to yet, but the fact that that so many people don't get help, and that like 27% of people said that they actively sought help and were not able to find it. But again, like that is not it is not the core. And yeah,
that's like a whole nother big discussion. Sorry, but it's people who do that are obviously suffering in some way, but people go the wrong direction. It's sort of like all people who are shooting are suffering with something, but not all people who are suffering with something are going to go out and do a mass shooting. Am I making sense?
You are right. Okay. Because a person who is loved and supported and the epitome of health in every way, shape, and form is not going to go out and do a mass shooting. So it's like, well, how can somebody do that? Well, there must be something wrong with them. But again, it's now equating this diagnosis with this extreme.
Right.
And that's not who I am. Right. And so I think, Michelle, the way, like you were saying, it kind of depends on the person, how you respond to this. But I think it's simply the response of, we're not, this isn't the way it is. Not everybody who has a mental health issue or diagnosis is going to do this. We need to separate out what's really going on here.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, what else do you have for us in our last few minutes together?
Well, I started to say something and it meant to be catching, because then
it just fly right out.
Yes.
Somewhere
it absolutely did. But Another thing that I want us to kind of talk about when it comes to diagnosis, because we've talked here for a few minutes on fear, and it just came back to me. But like I was going to kind of bring up how, when you and I were formulating the school program, how many people, when we first talked to them about it, thought it was about how to prevent a school shooting.
Oh, right. Right. We were writing a mental health program to help teachers
we
and
wanted
students.
And that was people's first responses?
Yes, that was their first responses. Now, this was a couple of years ago, but yeah, they all thought it was going to be about how to prevent school shootings. And so there is that bias there that kind of, I think, does contribute to some of the fear.
Right.
Around disclosing and talking about it and so forth. But I really want to kind of like swing back around to different positive ways to kind of navigate. So, we were talking about, okay, here you have a diagnosis, maybe it provides relief, maybe it is something that's causing fear or causing anxiety in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But where do you go from there? What's the next step?
Are you asking us?
Yes.
So are you saying sort of like, okay, you've been diagnosed and now you've had the fear or you have the whatever, then
what would your advice be? What would your advice be to someone who just received a mental health diagnosis or is concerned, obviously maybe they're going in to help with that? Like, what would your advice be?
To me, it's intimacy.
Wait,
to me, it's intimacy. It's finding at least one person that you can trust, that you feel safe with. Because I mean, it's a core human need.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what, that's what saves us, I believe, are those connections. And it doesn't have to be, because a lot of us might not have the supportive families and we might be in unhealthy, toxic relationships. So it's a therapist, right? Or we're talking about churches, or it's somebody in the church, or it's somebody.
Right.
Find at least one person that they can have that safety with.
That's good. The one person they can be real with.
Yeah.
Completely real.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
I would go along with that too. So like you're saying, finding that person, your support person, but also finding the professional in your life who, because I'm assuming if you've had a diagnosis, then it's with the professional, but making sure that it's someone that you trust and that, that lives in the same sort of core belief system that you do and is listening to you and is hearing you and helping guide you through this. Being open, and finding that person you trust, because I mean, the first person that I met with as a counselor before the hospital and everything was awful. I know I've shared that with Michelle before, but awful. And it set me back.
Yeah.
And so,
that's kind of exactly, that was definitely kind of one of the things I was going to say as well. Finding the group that, from a treatment team standpoint, that fits with you, that you trust. You don't have to go to the first person that you see. If things do not feel like they connect well, if you don't necessarily understand or agree, if they don't explain things to you in a manner where you really understand, it's okay to kind
fire
of move
them.
On to the
oh, sorry.
Yes, you can fire them. Yes, you absolutely can. And something else I would say is to kind of realize that, a diagnosis is one thing. It is not who you are. And that's across the board. Physical health, mental health, it's who you are. The narrative that you have over what the diagnosis is and how you're going to proceed, like, that's important. And when I say that, I mean, like, being someone like a clinician that prescribes medicine, I do run into the narrative of medicine is the answer. And we've talked about that before. It's always only one piece.
Yep.
Like, there is not a single mental or physical health diagnosis where other things in addition to medicine won't aid in living life better. mean, if it's, you have high blood pressure, they might give you blood pressure medicine, but they're going to give you other suggestions as well. And so kind of realizing that, it's a holistic thing with many pieces. I would definitely kind of say that as well.
That is so good.
And I would like to hear, like, the person, maybe I can get them to tell me, the one that said it was an epic adventure.
We'd love to hear more about that.
A great story.
Let's add on to these things too, for people who are listening, to say, also be kind to yourself. And it's like what you just said, Michelle, that is not who you are. And we are on a journey. And so if things are going better for you and then you feel like you're sliding back and it's okay that this is an up and down, and be open to trying the things because you trust that person. And like Gracie said, you found a support person, and just be on that journey and know that it's okay. And this is not everything of who you are. So be kind to yourself.
Yes.
Don't beat
and
yourself
there'll be
up.
some resources in the show notes, like NAMI,
Perfect.
which has lots of information, support groups, but there'll definitely be some resources on support, information, education when it comes to different mental health diagnosis.
Awesome. And we should say too, we'll say this at the beginning more often, that the things we talk about here are not designed to be therapy just for you or advice just for you. We hope that it is very helpful to you, but that's why we always want to have resources in the show notes for you. And I think we'll go ahead and put every single time some of the major like crisis lines and things like that. And then whatever specific things we talked about during the show. So Michelle, that was so amazing. I love that topic. Is there anything you didn't say that you wished you had of or want to, or as we're wrapping up?
Just to make sure everybody knows they're not alone.
No.
There's 50 million all out there together.
That's right. We are all out there together. We are. So thank you all for being here. As always, please go visit the show notes. We'll have Gracie's info, Michelle's info, my info, all of the resources. If you are a woman and you are not part of our private Facebook group, there will be a link in there for that as well. What else have I forgotten? That it?
I think that's it.
Okay. Well then, let's try. We will always continue this, even as we change other things about the show. We will have our nice, awkward, loving, because we want you to leave here feeling hugged. So we'll just try it and see how it goes. So until we're together next time,
consider yourself hugged.
That was pretty good.